Hello and welcome back to Gappleton. Today we are doing a little bit of work on the C10 here. I'm waiting on a new clutch from 2 episodes ago. The install didn't go as planned. I think the kit I had was wrong, so I went going with the new clutch kit. That install will be quick. But what we're going to do in the meantime is a couple rounds of mods. There are going to be some intermediate stuff to sort of future-proof this a little bit. In the last episode, we discovered that big failure in the V-band where it had broken the weld. For a long time, I thought that my solid crossover tube wasn't going to be a problem. I've inspected it numerous times. Thought, oh great, it's fine. Well, it turns out that wasn't going to be the failure point. It was made, I built it a little nicer than the header was built, so the V-band on the header failed. So one of the things we're going to be doing today is adding in that flex joint into this straight section of pipe here. This is going to allow for a little bit of heat expansion between the two sides of the engine and the whole crossover tube to kind of take some of that stress out of the whole system. Another thing that we're going to be doing is installing a new slave cylinder. This one actually uses a brake line style flare fitting as opposed to the one that's in there now that uses this little T fitting that's has a roll pin going sideways through it. It started leaking just from hanging underneath the truck. And when I stepped on the pedal, it actually shot fluid. So it's actually, I don't know, it's a pretty poor design. This is meant for just a later year truck, so obviously the design has been improved. So we're going to make a new little section of line here. It should only be about a 12-inch section because the way I made this, there's a nice little mating point or a coupler very close by. So this should be an easy project. So here we can see the side-by-side. This is the old one with its, let's see. There's a T-shaped fitting that goes in there, and then that little roll pin intersects it and sits behind the T, and that kind of holds it in. There is a lot of slop. You can wiggle this in and out about a 1/4 inch, and I believe that's kind of an inferior design. So the new cylinder, the cylinder itself looks the same, except it uses an actual flare fitting to go into there instead of the back like before. I think that's going to be a much better... There's a reason they updated it. So I just have to make this little 12-inch section of line, get to bust out the brake line tools, and yeah, should be fun. If you've never used one of these brake flaring tools, this is probably one of my favorite tools in the shop. It's an absolute joy to do brake lines with one of these. Ever since I bought it, yeah, they're not cheap up front, but it's well worth it for the quality of flare that you get. So how it works is there's this little dial block, and it's like operation 0. It's just a flat face. So you fit your line in the block, you leave it hanging out a little bit, clamp it down. Do this sort of loosely, don't go crazy on this first part. So what you want to do with this operation 0, that yellow, it's going to square up the end. So when you crank this lever down, it brings everything to 0. And from here, you can tighten this down, and it really doesn't need a ton. And then from there, you're looking for operation 1 for 1/4 inch. So you spin that around until you get to that. This is 1/4 inch operation 1. I don't know if you can read that. Then you just crank this around. You can feel it stop. Now, because we're doing a double flare on this, I need to look for operation 2 for 1/4 inch, which is the very next one. So that's going to get me that double flare. So then crank that down, and we're done. This is going to be a perfect flare. So let her loose, undo the block, and there you have it. that is a perfect flare that's going to seal up every time. Brake lines definitely have potential to be one of the worst jobs on a car just because of how tedious they can be. But with the right tools and a little bit of patience, you can get professional results out of your own lines. You could definitely go buy pre-made lines from the parts store, but for the cost of that spool of line and that little mix of fittings that came with the line even, that was basically the cost of one pre-made line. And look, this took me all of 2 minutes to make this parts store OEM quality line that's going to seal up every time, and I still have tons left over to do whatever else I want. A simple little bender and cutter. This tool is definitely a more premium option as far as getting the actual flares done, but one that I would highly recommend if you're going to be doing this even more than once. Definitely worth the investment. I am going to be waiting to actually bend up and install the line until the transmission's back in, just because it's slightly different than the one that came out. I don't want to run into any issues where having to rebend and potentially kink the line anywhere. So I'm going to wait until the clutch is installed. That'll probably have to be the same case for my crossover tube, just to make sure that that flex joint doesn't interfere with the transmission at all. You may have noticed the little V-notch in the crossover tube itself. It's pretty tucked, and it's probably one of the lowest points on the truck, so I don't want to have to cause any more problems for myself. So once the transmission's back installed, I can finish up the this new clutch line that we made and the flex joint in the crossover tube, and we should be rocking and rolling again. So this is probably the flaring tool that a lot of you might be familiar with. And I tried for the longest time to make this one work, and I could not get a straight flare to save my life. I greased the inserts, I cranked the ever-living bejeebus out of these wing nuts to the point where I actually broke one at one point to try and get it. This is a Harbor Freight version, and yeah, in this case you do get what you pay for. So as you can see, you can see it plain as day. So the holes are not even square for where the line goes through. You can see that they're kind of off at an angle. They're a little askew. So there's not a chance in the world that that fitting was ever going to come out straight for that one specific size of line that I needed right there. And even this one a little bit. I think that being the 3/16 and the 1/4 inch. So the two primary line sizes that you're going to use on a vehicle, there's not a chance in the world those are ever going to make good fittings. So yeah, after probably a dozen failed attempts, I finally gave it up with this one, realizing what the exact issue was. And I probably haven't touched this thing in several years. It could go in the trash for all I care. All right, so I'm jumping ahead a little bit. The crossover tube, the trans is back in with the new clutch. Crossover tube is back in place, just sizing up to make sure that our flex joint's gonna fit. So I think what it's gonna do, it's gonna go in right here. Just looking, this is my concern why I couldn't do this until I had the trans back in. Looks like it's gonna fit just fine. So the next step is gonna be to cut out some metal here, not all. Take this out, loosely fit this in. I'm gonna tack it underneath. I'm gonna have both ends of the V-band clamped up fully tight, and then I'm going to tack underneath the car, a couple spots on either side of the flex joint. Make sure it's fully tacked in place, take it back out, weld it, put it back in. All right, we're back underneath the truck. I got the V-band passenger side clamped up. I have this flex joint loosely fitted in place, and I have the driver's side tightened up as well. So tightening these two V-bands by nature are self-centering. That's what they're gonna do. So by tightening them down fully, I have the pipe where it's gonna live most happiest. Prior to doing this, the pipe did have to flex a little bit to find that centered position, and that's probably what contributed to that flange cracking off. So having these fully tightened down prior to welding this flex joint, it's gonna leave the least amount of stress on this flex joint and hopefully have it live the longest under boost. I know there's some question as to boosted applications, how these joints hold up, but they're kind of necessary. So we're gonna hope for the best here. All right, so the clutch is done. Everything's all bolted back up. Crossover tube is in and bled. Only thing left to do is start it up. So my buddy Drew's over here. He's gonna start it for us, and I'm gonna listen for hopefully no nonsense. All right, we're idling. Sitting a nice 1,000 RPM. Go ahead and put it in first gear. Oh yeah. We got a speed signal if you start speeding up.
Yep.
Back to neutral. All right. All right, I am calling that a success. Granted, it was only a 3-minute drive, but I made it at least through like 3 or 4 gears, and it did the thing. Takes off from a stop, sits in neutral, no problem, no drama. So yeah, we're calling that a win, and we can carry on with our NV3500 science. Thank you for watching, and we will see you next time on Gappleton.